In the current role, we have Donald Trump as the demagogue who's leading the field, and a lot of people in the party are horrified at the possibility, and indeed one has to concede the probability, that he is going on to be the nominee, because they don't believe that he can beat Joe Biden, and indeed it's perfectly clear that the Democrats and Joe Biden want to face Donald Trump, particularly an indicted and perhaps weakened Donald Trump. So it may not be a sufficient thing for the Republicans to do, but it's a necessary thing that they winnow the field and that they back someone.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here today with Editor-in-Chief Hugo Gurdon. And Hugo, you wrote in your column this week about how what happened for the Democrats in the 2020 primary might be the only hope for Republicans in the 2024 primary, where, everybody sort of dropped out and endorsed who they saw as their most electable rival. Refresh everyone's memory about what happened after the New Hampshire primary in 2020.
Yeah, what happened, Sarah, is that Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, won a little over 25% of the Democratic votes in the New Hampshire primary. Pete Buttigieg was only about 1 or 1.5 points behind him. Joe Biden was down at 8 or 9%. But the Democratic establishment suddenly realized, to their horror, that the party really was feeling the burn, and it may be that this cranky socialist would get chosen by the party as the nominee and then go on to electoral defeat in the general. And so they rallied around Biden, boosted him to the lead. Amy Klobuchar dropped out. Pete Buttigieg, who was so close to Bernie in New Hampshire, dropped out. They all backed Biden. He won South Carolina and went on to win the nomination. So the party, facing a candidate they were really worried about would get crushed in the general election, turned to someone who they thought was electable, even though they just made their choice. They decided winning was more important than fighting it out over a long period and choosing the wrong person.
Fast forward to 2024, Republicans are grappling with a similar dilemma, that the person who appears to be leading right now is generally considered unelectable in a general election. We already saw that happen in 2020, proven that was the case. Could a similar scenario, though, even be realistic, given that Trump's lead is so much bigger?
Yeah, there are many differences. Bernie Sanders was not 40 points and more ahead of the field. He was actually, it was pretty close. But there are also some similarities. There was this socialist demagogue. In the current role, we have Donald Trump as the demagogue who's leading the field, and a lot of people in the party are horrified at the possibility, and indeed one has to concede the probability, that he is going on to be the nominee, because they don't believe that he can beat Joe Biden, and indeed it's perfectly clear that the Democrats and Joe Biden want to face Donald Trump, particularly an indicted and perhaps weakened Donald Trump. So it may not be a sufficient thing for the Republicans to do, but it's a necessary thing that they winnow the field and that they back someone. Now, it's impossible for them to choose who they would back right now, because perhaps Ron DeSantis is at 18%. Former Governor Haley is now in double figures, but they have to choose very quickly, because they can't just decide on the eve of Iowa or after Iowa, because then it might be too late.
Could some of those candidates who have so far stayed silent on Donald Trump or not really criticized him aggressively, you mentioned Senator Tim Scott is one of those Republicans, could they actually have a disincentive to back a rival in case that effort fails and they box themselves out of a VP spot, a Secretary of State position? Yeah,
well, everybody, one of the things that people are frightened of about Trump is not simply that he will go on to defeat, but he will turn his revenge and his wrath on anybody who defies him by coalescing around a rival candidate. Now, a candidate like Senator Tim Scott, who is very likable, has a great personal story to tell, but who is probably not going to go on to be the nominee, has very deftly and carefully not directly confronted Trump. There's a possibility, and I don't know if he has any particular interest in this, but there's certainly a possibility that he might think, well, I might have a senior role to play in a Trump administration or any other administration. So he has no very great personal political incentive to turn against Trump, back up one of the other candidates. And I mean, really the only absolutely out and out anti-Trump candidate in the Republican field at the moment is Chris Christie. It's Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence are sort of tending in that direction, but most of them are avoiding direct confrontation because they want Trump's supporters and they don't want Trump's wrath. So yes, it's going to be a harder lift. When in 2020, when Pete Buttigieg dropped out, being the second only to Bernie, what happened? He ended up being in the Biden cabinet.
Well, Hugo, thank you so much for joining us today. You can get more writing from Hugo and the rest of the commentary team at washingtonexaminer.com.